Okay, just lower yourself down gently, gently, get into position. Right, about there. You happy with that? You safe? Tell you what, Helen, man, she's absolutely amazing doing this for me to get these camera angles. Helen, just swivel around, just so that the viewers can see the fantastic scenery behind you there. Yeah, that's it. And then come round back to me. Yeah, brilliant. We're set to go? Right, so, are Newcastle United under investigation by the Premier League in relation to its owner status with the PIF? Well, yesterday the Premier League CEO Richard Masters was grilled in front of a Parliamentary Select Committee over various things, including Newcastle United and their ownership with the PIF. And this is what
aware of the legal case that's taken place in America between the PGA and Live Golf, and the involvement of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. You've been given assurances that the Saudi government doesn't have any direct control over Newcastle United Football Club by Amanda Staveley. But in a statement, in an interview that I saw on Twitter, she says that PIF is an autonomous, commercially driven investment fund. But in the submissions in the court case, that the Public Investment Fund is claiming it is a government body and therefore has sovereign immunity and cannot be called to give evidence or submit evidence in the litigation. Is that going to prompt you to revisit the Newcastle United Football Club arrangements?
I'm afraid I'm going to frustrate you, Clive, because I can't really comment on it. I mean, even to the point of saying, is the Premier League investigating it? We can't really comment on it. Obviously, we are completely aware, and you're correct about the general nature of the undertakings that we received at the point of takeover. But I can't really go into it at all. The only time when the Premier League comments publicly on regulatory issues is when it's charged, and at the end of the process when an independent panel has decided whether any rule breaches have actually taken place. And the investigatory process we don't talk about at all.
So there you go, that was a Parliamentary Select Committee yesterday asking Richard Masters, the Premier League CEO, whether Newcastle United are currently under investigation in relation to its ownership with the PIF. From the outset, I just want to say that I take no pleasure in making videos like this. Of course, I don't want any turmoil for the club. We've had enough over recent years. My motivation for videos like this is to establish the facts, do as much research as I can, and present them to you so that you have a better understanding of what's going on, because this is potentially a serious situation for the club. The backdrop is the government haven't been happy with how English football is being run for several years now. Examples of that are, for example, clubs becoming too rich and too powerful, and recently the top six trying to break away to form their own league. The financial gulf between the Premier League and the rest of English football is growing larger every year, and that means grassroots football in England is really starting to struggle, and in particular lots of matches are having to be cancelled. Some clubs are overspending and getting themselves into real financial difficulties. Some clubs are making changes to clubs' heritage assets, for example the badge or the colours, and a whole host of things. So they set up a review to look at what's wrong with English football and then to make some recommendations, which they have. The FA have took that on board and have just started to implement that, and part of that is the establishment of an independent regulatory body to oversee English football so that the Premier League and the FA can be held accountable in relation to various things that are going on, including tightening up on the owners and directors tests. Recent examples of the Premier League and FA flexing their power, certainly 12 months ago, was Abramovich, the Chelsea owner, being forced to sell the club due to his links to Vladimir Putin after Russia invaded Ukraine. About 5 weeks ago, it was announced that the Premier League have charged Man City with numerous breaches of financial fair play between 2009 and 2018. If found guilty, Man City could face some horrendous sanctions, including being expelled from the Premier League, having their 3 Premier League titles taken off them during that period. Heavy fines, point deductions, could be anything. In the last few days, a week or so ago, Everton were also charged breaching financial fair play by overspending. They could face a heavy points deduction and be dropped into the Championship. So the Premier League are showing that they're not afraid to take on the Premier League's rich and powerful clubs in a way that they deem is necessary, because they've got the government breathing down the neck in order for the FA and the Premier League to clean up English football. Unfortunately, Newcastle United have also now been pulled into this eye of scrutiny. If you recall, when the takeover happened, the Premier League only allowed it to go ahead on the legally binding assurances that the Saudi state had no involvement in the running of Newcastle United. Of course, there's a big grey area because the PIF is run and owned by the government. But those were the legally binding assurances. Yasser Al-Rumayyan was made chairman of Newcastle United, the governor of the PIF. Not long after the takeover, Amanda Staveley did have an interview with the BBC and is on record stating that the PIF is an autonomous, commercially driven investment fund. Autonomous as in it's independent of the government and is free to make its own decisions. Happy days. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago in America and California, there's been a fallout between PGA and Live Golf. Live Golf are at least partly owned and funded by the PIF, which Yasser Al-Rumayyan is the chairman. This has all got messy and it's gone to court, and the Californian judge out there subpoenaed Yasser Al-Rumayyan to court and served papers on the PIF to give testimony and evidence in this litigation. In response, lawyers representing the PIF have basically said, and you'll need to just look up the exact word and I'll paraphrase that, the PIF are in fact a government body, and they use the words of it should be treated like a foreign state. Now, of course, the PIF isn't a country or a state with geographical boundaries, but it's stressed that it should be treated as a foreign state and therefore has sovereign immunity from any right to give evidence in any legal litigation. And that included Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who was described by the lawyers representing the PIF as a sitting government minister. Of course, that's news to a lot of people, contrary to a document that was floating around, taken in isolation to say he was a minister. That's completely misrepresentative of the situation. So that's put a huge spotlight on Newcastle United. I did a video about this about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was my belief at the time that Newcastle United would probably be subject to some complaints by other Premier League clubs and certainly from human rights groups to re-examine the relationship between Newcastle United and the PIF. So that's the dichotomy that Newcastle United finds itself in now. We've got Amanda Staveley on record saying that the PIF is an autonomous, commercially driven investment fund, independent of the government, yet when they come under legal scrutiny, the PIF have retaliated by saying, "Hold on, we should be treated as a foreign state and we have sovereign immunity." There's a contradiction there which has caused these problems, and that's why Richard Masters was asked those questions in front of that Parliamentary Select Committee, and of course he wouldn't be drawn into making a comment on that. Of course, I'm a passionate Newcastle United fan. I'm a season ticket holder. I've been going to the match for decades now. I don't want any sort of turmoil. I want all this to go away. But if you're asking me, do I think Newcastle are being investigated as we speak? Yes, I do. Am I personally concerned about where this investigation could head? Yes, I am, because this is unprecedented. The Premier League have never found themselves in this position where they're going to have to revisit an owners and directors test. So I've got absolutely no idea what might happen. If you're asking me opinion, I do think in the coming weeks or months there might be some changes in relation to the ownership of Newcastle United in terms of resetting the boundaries and legal framework of the PIF ownership over Newcastle United. We might even see Yasser Al-Rumayyan step down from his chairman position, could be replaced by somebody else from the PIF, and assurances given to the Premier League that should they wish to interrogate the PIF in any sort of legal financial litigation, that they're not going to pull out the sovereign immunity card, because that could create all sorts of difficulties. And all this is just such a shame, really, because great things are happening to Newcastle United in all sorts of different ways. We've got some owners who are committed and motivated to build this into a great and successful club, not just for the first team, but also right the way through grassroots football in this area, through the academy, women's football, with their desires to get the women's team into the Premier League. So this is a situation we really could avoid, and I think the PIF have really, if I'm honest, have dropped a bollock on this one. I don't know what they're playing at. You cannot have it both ways. They're going to have to back down on one side or the other in order for this to move forward, and I really hope it does, and this all just gets sorted out. So anyway, that's it from me in this particular video. I hope that you found it interesting and you feel enlightened a little bit more as to the current situation. But I need to get Helen off that rope and back into safety. Whoa, Ellen, whoa, 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 you okay? Come up. Yeah, I'll get you.